Hey, it's White Cheddar coming to you from Clinton, Oklahoma. I'm taking my 30. Hey, how about you, YouTube? You got it on? I hope you do, because I got a good one for you today. I'm a little heated up. It's been a while. It's been a week or so since I posted a video. I was working on a um, oh Valentine's Day podcast, and my son was sick. He got the flu, and then we had Valentine's Day. I had to help Queen Lizzie, package up a bunch of cakes and desserts for all her customers. She did really good. Appreciating everybody that helped us out with that. Sorry. As you can see, I caught the flu that my son had, and so we got through Valentine's Day. Had a nice day. Had some steaks and just stayed home and took care of each other and got through it all. But I just couldn't get myself motivated and the energy, and I haven't been this sick in like 12 years, and it knocked me on my butt for about 3 days, but I pulled through, just toughed it out, just alternating Tylenol and Motrin and just sweating it out and got through it. So, but a bad cough with that flu, which I'm still kind of dealing with now with my throat, so it's kind of hard to talk. So I'm going to try not to get too excited. But the topic I have today, it really does get me excited, because if you know me, I'm as blue collar as it gets. I am for the workers. I'm always the first in line to let somebody know when they're getting screwed by a company, or which companies are bad, which companies are predatory, which ones are exploiting workers, and I will be the first one to let them know, even at the peril of my own job or anything. What's right is what's right. And where we've moved in America is not right, and it's not headed in the right direction, despite what everybody claims to be happening. And this isn't a liberal thing or a conservative thing or a Democratic or a Republican thing. What you guys have got to understand is what a monopoly is. We talked a little bit about this in my last episode, and a lot of people think they understand monopolies, but they don't really understand the applied history. When we look back in history, and how did monopolies come to exist? Well, they came to exist by the monarchy of England and France, and the monarchs who had the powers had oligarchs underneath them, or wealthy merchant class, in other words, if you want to put it that way, the market owners and whatnot. But the monarchy delegated the commodities. So, like, say you had the sheep farming industry back then there to make clothing and whatnot. The monarch dictated which oligarch held that business. They cut up the pie of all these different commodities and gave it to their friends, or their which are equivalent is the billionaire class now. These uh, business owners. So one family or maybe two families were the only ones who made money off of wool. And then, like pork, they regulated the meat industries. They regulated, the monarch are the ones who dictated, and that's where the term monopoly first arose. And it wasn't for the workers; it was for the owners of, people were still. It was a feudalist system, and they were still under the control of the monarch and their oligarchs underneath them. So. You could tell it wasn't good for the worker. It wasn't good for the blue collar. So when we talk about the applied history of monopolies, that's what you need to understand. That's where it originated. And a really good example to tell you is about the tea industry, right? So the England, the monarchs, they had an oligarch under him that was the tea czar, that controlled all the tea sales and the movement of tea throughout America. That's where we got the tea from. They wouldn't, the Great Britain wouldn't allow Americans, the colonists, to buy tea from anywhere else other than where they said they had to buy it from, which was this oligarch. So we dumped their fucking tea in a harbor, and we said, no, we don't think so. We'll buy tea wherever the hell we want, despite what you say. We thumbed their nose at England and said, we're not down with that. So that, of course, led to revolution and, of course, America as we know it today. So we're going to fast forward a little bit. America's growing. It's prospering. It's got a lot of natural resources. We got forests. We got steel. We got oil. We got all this stuff that's growing. And we had capitalism and fair market practices, and so what started happening was, let's just say oil, for instance, came around, and you had Standard Oil. And what Standard Oil did is when companies compete, you had Standard Oil, and maybe you had 10 other oil companies or 20 other oil companies that were competing for the market. So when you have competition, if you start selling your product too high, your competition is going to lower their price a little bit, so people start buying from that. It's going to take away, and there's kind of this race to where they're both, a fair market, the pricing. But that competition between those businesses is what spurs lower prices for the consumers. So you always want competition in the market, because that's what drives down the pricing. And we'll get into how that affects workers, at the end of this episode. But I'm just trying to explain how a monopoly works, and in the history of it. So, anyways, yeah, Standard Oil. There's two ways for companies. The ones with the best business practices and maybe the most efficient. Excuse me. They'll eventually start winning out, and then they'll start getting bankers involved, borrow some money to be able to buy two other oil companies, buy those families out, and just take over their share of the market. And then now they're a little bit bigger, so they can be a little bit more efficient, because with scale, as you scale up your businesses, the process of production of that gets cheaper. So once they buy up two or three other businesses, they're scaling up, and they're getting more efficient at producing the end product that we buy, which makes it harder for this mom and pop over here to compete on pricing, because they can't produce it for as much as this bigger company. So then they ultimately end up buying these other two or three companies, putting them out of business. And then before you know it, you have all these fucking robber barons in America, that, like Standard Oil, that own 80% of the oil market. So once they don't have any competition to fight to keep that price, they can just gouge their prices whatever they want. They can sell it for whatever they want. And they did it with oil and steel and timber and every other commodity. There's these robber barons that just monopolize the market. So the United States did have to step in, and through a series over a long period of time, we did have antitrust laws and anti-monopoly laws that once a company got so big, it kind of, the government would step in and say, and break it up. Say, like I think AT&T was one that they broke up in my lifetime, that they broke it into 4 different companies just because they had gotten too big, too consolidated. But yeah, there's a that's one way, is by buying up the competition, and that's called horizontal integration. When you're buying your competitors and you're adding them into your company, and it just becomes bigger and bigger. There's also vertical integration, to where that's more of the supply side, to where, like, a company that produces something, and they have to buy, say they're producing widgets over here, but they have to buy aluminum, right? So there's 30 different aluminum companies out there that they can choose to buy from. So they're competing to sell it to this company to produce their widgets. Well, what happens is this company ultimately just starts buying up the companies that make the aluminum. So that's what you call a vertical integration, is when you start buying your suppliers, so then you're all enclosed in-house, and and there's no competition of the buyers. That's another way that they can continue their monopoly. So what's happened in America in the late 1900s and probably around, I'd say around like 1980, it started just exponentially ramping up these monopolies, these purchasing of other companies and suppliers, and companies were building bigger and bigger, and and what that did is allowed these big companies to control the pricing of their items. And like I said, once there was no competition or anybody who couldn't compete because they couldn't either get the product, the raw resources they needed to produce their widgets, or they couldn't buy up their competition, these other businesses just started fading away, bankrupting, and just they kept on growing, which is where we're at now. If you look at America, I think they said that the top 1.1% of Americans, the billionaires that own everything, the top 0.1% of America owns like more than 50% of all the other people combined, and then that's how big they have gotten. So how did America get back into this monopolistic practice? Well, they intermeshed the government and corporations in what I call a neo-fascism. It's pretty much fascism. I hate to throw out that word because, like any internet argument, it always goes back to Hitler, and when you start talking into these fascist ideas and stuff, and it's an alarmist thing, and I don't want to alarm people, but you do need to understand that where we're at right now is a nation that's ran by corporations. They're the ones with the attorneys that are able to lobby, get bills passed, get everything. But where we're entering now is a very dangerous point to where it's almost getting to where, and I can see it clear as day, and a lot of people can't. They don't even think about this shit half the time, but the companies are running America, this billionaire class, and you don't have to look too hard into it to realize this, that the monopolies have won, and they fucking own everything. Every industry is owned by either one, two, or three companies that have vertically or horizontally integrated their supply chains and their competitors into a monopoly. It's just crazy for me thinking about it of how we got here. I've been watching it. I was born in 1980. I've been watching this literally since I was born happen, and looking at the people I grew up with and around me. Like, I grew up in the South, and people were always like anti-union, like, fuck unions, fuck unions, they're just there to take your money and all this. And that's all I ever heard when I was young. And I was the same way. I'd be like, yeah, if you don't like working here, just go work somewhere else, and I was always like that. But what I didn't realize at that time when I was younger was that I was being exploited. The workers are being exploited. And there's a term that I didn't even know existed till today. I was watching a podcast, or listening to a podcast the other night while I was working, and I didn't even know this word existed, but it's called a monopsony. Monopsony, not monopoly, monopsony. And it's the alternative to monopoly. Like, a monopoly is when there's one person to buy from, so there's no competition to what you've got to buy. Monopsony is the exact opposite of that. And in simple terms, a monopsony is like a market situation where there's only one buyer facing many sellers, and in this case, the buyer has a significant power over prices and market conditions. But one seller controls the market. And how does that apply to the trucking industry? And what you can see is like these mega carriers that we have, like Prime, and these companies that have 5,000 trucks or 3,000 trucks or whatever, they have a monopsony power over their employers or over their employees, right? because they have all the brokerage, they have all the freight, because they have so many trucks and such a big division that they can control the rates. And I saw this a lot in frac sand when I was down in Texas, and especially now. Like, you used to be able to make money with mom and pop companies in the frac sand industry, and because the mega carriers really hadn't got involved in it, it was still the commodity of frac sand hadn't been infiltrated by the mega carriers. So that's why I would always go haul frac sand, because the big companies hadn't moved in yet and just knocked the freight rates out of it. But the last time I was down in Texas, down in South Texas, we were doing pretty good. But I was noticing that there was these fleets of frac sand hauling, and there's 80 trucks, there's 100 trucks in this fleet, maybe there's 200 trucks in this fleet. And I've done a little market research over the past few weeks, and just because I was looking at maybe getting back into it, I've heard a few things from a few guys, and what I've realized is, like, the market's consolidated. It's monopolized down there. You can't make no money in frac sand because these big companies have stepped in and they've brokered all the freight. So if you have a little 10 truck company, you're not going to be able to compete with a 200 truck company as far as, because scaled up efficiencies. Just another industry that's got monopolized. So the monopsony of it is when they control when they control all the brokers of the freight, you're just shit out late. You got to take whatever pay they're going to give you, or kick rocks and go on. There's no rights for the workers. It's gotten to that point to where you just can't make money doing it. I mean, you can make a little bit of money, but it's just going to be enough to barely squeak by in life. It's not like it used to be, when it was a fair market and there was competition for freight and brokerage, and you could get by on a little bit of extra service and a little bit of extra hustle, and it's just not like that anymore. You have to compete with the almighty dollar, and a small company just can't compete against those big companies. So but yeah, a few companies that control a large share of the market is pretty much what I'm trying to say here. And I just I didn't know there was a word for it, monopsony. So it's pretty cool that these theories and ideas that I've had, I'm actually finding out there's actual terms for it. Somebody that probably went to college knows this. Y'all let me know in the comments below if you've ever heard of that word before, because like I said, I didn't finish college. I went a couple years. They were teaching a lot of stuff that I already knew. Had a kid, I had to drop out and get started working, so I never followed up on it. But I do try to educate myself every day, and when I find out stuff, I need to constantly be learning things. So just a fun little word I thought I'd share with you. Let's see here, I got some notes. Yeah, but it also affects, independent owner operators, of course. Like I said, if you only have not just company drivers. Like, if I was to go down to South Texas now and try to get a job as a company driver, I'm a dime a dozen, and they got all the freight, so they're going to pay me this, and you be happy. Well, how does that affect the owner operators? Well, because those companies can now brokerage the whole job, and take all the freight, there's nothing left over for the owner operators. So the owner operators are leasing on to these bigger companies. Yeah, we'll come work for you, but they have to, same as the company employee, they have to take whatever they're going to get paid on it, and it's not going to be good for them. I mean, the bigger companies are going to make money, and they ain't got to do nothing because they own the contracts, they own the freight and the brokerage of all these loads. So there's nothing that an owner operator can do it other than sell their trailer and go haul some other kind of commodity, which, God, that's, I hate to see it, because I see a lot of guys still pumping money into frac sand and trying to get with it. Maybe they can move to a different area, but it's all consolidation, and unfortunately, I think what we're moving into, this is where you put on the tinfoil hat now. Okay, this is White Cheddar with the tinfoil hat on now. So this is what kind of gets me excited about what's happening. Is I don't know how this shit's going to go down with the recent election of President Trump, and what's going on in our news and media. And I try to tune it out as much as I can, but you just cannot ignore some of the shit that you're seeing out there. You've got a billionaire working hand in hand with the executive branch of the government and other billionaires. It's not just Elon Musk. There's other billionaires that are working hand in hand, and I really think that America is moving towards a fascist regime. I mean, that's all signs are pointing to that. You look at Project 2025, and you look at their playbook and what they're doing, and they're taking out the legal system aspect of it, the judiciary part of our government. They're trying to remove all that. So the only time you want to get rid of judges is when you're trying to break the law, right? And the Constitution is the ultimate law of our land. So why are they going against these judges and not not doing what the judges tell them to do to stay or whatever? They're and now I seen the other day that, like, the JAGs, the military judges, they're getting rid of them too, and it's like the only time you want to get rid of judges on a mass scale is when you're fixing to do something really big. So I think what's fixing to happen is we're going to move into a fascist country that's controlled by the executive branch and all the oligarchs that live underneath them. We're going back to a monarchy, which is just crazy in my opinion. Like I said, tinfoil hat. I'm just a crooked tooth Okie truck driver, so y'all don't get all up in arms about me. But I do study history, and I do try to look at things from every angle, and I'm trying to justify these actions as best I can. But also, if it walks like a duck, if it talks like a duck, it's probably a fucking duck. So I think what we're going to move into is they're going to nationalize the energy sector. That'll be their first step, and that was kind of a little. There's a lot of tongue in cheek going on, because a lot of times they'll say shit, and you got to take their word for what they're saying, even though they're saying it tongue in cheek. There's a reason why they're saying it. Take it from a salesman. Takes a salesman to know a salesman, and they're going to nationalize energy. And they're going to take over the oil and gas industries. And, of course, the government will appoint whichever billionaire, oligarch, or maybe two different oil company execs or companies. They're going to call it American Oil. And they will come in, they'll nationalize those commodities. And then after that, it'll be the food production, it'll be the automobile industry, and you'll just start seeing the nationalization of these businesses, which they will claim gives us strength. It gives us strength to where these industries will continue on. So very scary times in America. Like I said, I don't like to be an alarmist, but in my tinfoil hat opinion, that's what's going down. If you have other thoughts and opinions on it, I don't want to hear about any woke bullshit or whatever, because what they did was they instilled fear in everybody. Trump lost, and you had the woke movement, and you had all this stuff going on, so they got for 4 years to just bang that drum about all these enemies within our state, all these brown people they don't like, all these woke people they don't like. They just banged that drum for like 4 years on the radio waves, on the internet, just banged it out. Joe Rogan just banged out all this fear of these enemies within, and abroad. They pushed the China fear, like times 20. So they're just pumping this fear into all these Americans and saying our country's corrupt, our country's broken, the Chinese are going to take over, that's what these Republican radio stations are, these talk radio stations and news and all this stuff. That's all they do is just instill fear, and they just bang that drum over and over. They don't even tell the truth, they just lie, they bang the drum. There's enemies everywhere, you need us to save you. You need us to save you, and the American public is not highly educated. I think there's like 50% of Americans can't even read a contract, That's fucking scary. Well, how did it get that way? Well, the public education system. When you only educate people to this level, and that's good enough, send them out, get them working. You know, they want people just smart enough to push the buttons, but not smart enough to know why they're pushing the buttons, you know? So that's how we got to this point to where the people are just soaking this shit up like it's, oh yeah, you know, we trans people in sports, and just giving them all these little enemies within, which is the same thing that the fascist regimes of Europe did. You know, like I said, just use applied history. Just look at the history in the past, and it repeats itself, not one for one, but it's the same play, but that we went through in the 40s, in the 1940s, and you know, it's a sad state of affair. If you can see it, if you can look past all the rhetoric and the propaganda and all the woke bullshit and all this back and forth Democrat Republican shit, and see it for what it actually is, that's what it is. We're building a national socialist country. So, with that said, I don't mean to freak anybody out and be an alarmist about it, but just start watching and look at it from the perspective of monopolies. Why are they doing this? Why did they do this? How is that going to consolidate that industry even further? And you tell me. If I'm wrong, you tell me. Put down in the comments below that, Cheddar, you're full of shit. You know, they're doing this to keep, you know, bears out of the bathroom, or you know, we're doing this because our so and so is corrupt. And let me just say this one thing. This argument that I keep seeing is like, well, you just don't want the government to go after the corruption. I guarantee you 100% of every American wants to go after every bit of corruption in the United States. But they don't want to go after the billionaires. Why? Why don't they want to go after these monopolies and these companies that are just exploiting their workers and exploiting everybody? Because they're in on it. They're one and the same. The government and these big corporations are one and the same. You know? They want you to think it's your neighbor. They want you to think it's that brown guy down the street that took your job. They want you to think that it's some corrupt person in a political office, you know, in North Dakota Forestry Service. Why are they firing forestry people? That's like the crown jewel of America is all of our parks, our national parks. Why are they firing them? You know, it's not about waste. It's not about, you know, corruption in the government. It's because they want that commodities and those resources for their oligarch buddies so they can sell it. We don't need to buy Canadian timber if we just get rid of all the national parks and harvest all that to build the homes. And, you know, think about it. Think about it. I'm giving you a little bit to think about today. Just, you know, let me know in the comments. I hope you guys like this. Sorry about my voice and the coughing. I am getting better. I don't have a temperature. I returned to work the other day. Just have to sweat through it. My body hurts and aches, but I'll push through it. I'm tough. Get through it. But yeah, you guys give me a like. You know, maybe subscribe to the channel. If you click that little bell notification, it'll let you know when a new episode drops or if I'm going live. And I really appreciate you guys watching me. But the thing I want to leave you with before I go is, again, work with your neighbors. Work with your friends. Work with the people around you. These big companies, I don't care who you work for, if it's 100 people, if it's 500 people, if it's a 2,000 person company, those companies do not care about you. You are replaceable. Just like that. But the people that you live around and that you care about and that are doing good around you, support them. Support their businesses. They'll support your businesses just like they supported us on Valentine's Day, and they support us with my eBay sales and my other businesses. That's where we're going to have to get to, because I'm telling you, it's not going to be good if we have to work for a national socialist country. With that said, try to keep the shiny side up, and I'll talk to you later.